Okay, we're being recorded now, so Vivian, behave yourself.
I'll try.
Like that's ever gonna get old. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen now? The
Yes.
okay, where it says Bereshis and Rashi
Yes.
and all that. Okay, fine. But this is all I'm going to use. This only for as we kind of go through some of the version. But let's just look at the psukim. So on page 78, if you're in the art scroll, okay. Hope everybody remembers to vote today. If you haven't already, voted like 6 times already. It's amazing. I feel like I'm in Chicago. Okay, so Abraham was told he's going to have children, and he doesn't have children. Finally, God's like, what's going on? And he says, go out, count the stars, the whole bit. Okay, fine. Abraham, at the end of last week's parsha, he decides he's like 100 years old. Let me have a bris. And of course, we know the legend. He's sitting. It's the 3rd day. It's the most painful from the bris, and the angels come, and he's the angels. He's taking care of them. Okay. And he says, everybody should, he starts preparing this whole feast for them. And you go get this and you get that. And they have basar b'chalav, they have, butter and meat. Sure, why not? And page 80, Pasuk Tes. Vayomeru elav ayei Sarah ishtecha vayomer hinei v'ohel. They say, where is Sarah, your wife? I said, she's in the Ohel. People ask me that all the time. Where's Sarah? Oh, she's in the Ohel. Just like, we could go all, chauvinist here on this and say, she's in the kitchen, right? We don't bring her out in public. God forbid. Anyway, Vayomer shova shuv elecha ka'es chaya v'hine vein l'sari ishtecha v'sara shemas pesach ha'avahu acharav. And he said, I'm going to return to you next time this year. This is an important phrase, ka'es chaya, because it appears in the Haftorah, which we'll look at. And you're going to have a son. Sarah's going to have a son. I tell you, I tried to take this Aliyah every single year for a long, long time. The only problem is I'm not a Kohen. It's the first Aliyah. So that's why it never worked. So maybe one year I kicked out all the Kohanim and I took this Aliyah in 2014 and 2015. Look, lo and behold, and Sarah had a son. Anyway, she's, by the way, and what's always happening is that when the angels speak to the husband, the wives are always listening. So it says, Sarah shamas pesach ovu acharav. She was listening at the entrance of the tent, which was behind him. Now, if Erica were teaching this class, she'd be giving us some sophisticated piece of art, and we'd be looking at it, and we have to analyze it and say, she's listening like this, or she happened to be here, or whatever it is. Okay. Now, the Torah inserts, in case you didn't know, the Avraham v'Sarah zakenim ba'im b'yamim chadal yasar ochar Hashem. If you're wondering, they were old. They're really, really old. They're well on in years, and the manner of women ceased to be with Sarah. No, she's beyond her childbearing years, okay? She made Marissa Tomei look like a spring chicken, okay? If you understand what I'm talking about. Her biological clock was ticking. By the way, the role for which she won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in what movie?
My Cousin Vinny.
My Cousin Vinny. Cousin Vinny, okay? She that's the famous line. My biological clock is ticking.
Right.
But she won.
And she bangs her hands.
Yeah, it's on cable. It's one of those you have to watch when it's on. Okay. Anyway, and so this is the pasuk. Vatitzchak Sarah b'kirba lemor acharei v'losi haisa li edna va'adoni zaken. So she laughs. What? I'll read you the Art Scroll translation. I didn't write this. After I have withered, shall I again have delicate skin, and my husband is old? So further, what strikes you about this verse?
Kirba is within herself. It's not necessarily out loud. Even though the translation says at herself, the Hebrew is within herself.
Okay. Well,
So
first
it wasn't, yeah.
But even more than that, what's the from a word point of view? Okay, because we all know how the story ends, right? The son's name is Yitzchak. So it's like Vatitzchak. So is this some sort of foreshadowing? It's this. I mean, you can't help but ignore that connection between Vatitzchak and Yitzchak. Okay, that's one. Now, let me ask you, like, good thing or bad thing that she laughed? Forget about what you know already. You're reading this for the first time in your life, and she laughs, and you'd be like, yeah, I mean, it is actually kind of funny. Now, not funny like haha funny, funny as in ironic, or funny as in, what, are you kidding me? Like,
Or
really?
she might be delighted.
Say that again?
She might be delighted. I mean, like it might not, she might have laughed like in a happy kind of way.
That's because Vivian is such a sunny optimist.
That's true.
And yeah, because so how would you read that then? Oh, and she was delighted. And she said, ah, I have withered. I have delicate skin and my husband is old. Yes. Is that what it means?
No.
And they're telling her that she's going to have a son.
So how would you read that pasuk, Vivian? Could you please read the entire verse in your sunny disposition, rosy, optimistic glasses that you're wearing? Please tell me how you would read this verse.
You want me to actually read it, or
I want you to actually translate it the way you think that it should be read if this is sunny optimism.
No.
Because I get it. I get where you want to go with it, but it doesn't make sense in the words of the pasuk, right?
Okay. All right.
Right. And thank you so much for playing right into that. I really, it's like you lobbed me the softballs. I'm going to smack them out of the park. You know that. Anyway, so if that's not enough, and she says like, yeah, really? Yeah. Okay. Good one. I'm going to have kids. I'm so old. Not only that, if that's not enough, oh, you should see my husband. He's an AK like you can't believe. Okay.
She's also saying her skin's gonna get smooth.
Right? She's using some Regeneron products or whatever it is. Okay.
My skin's gonna look good again. Like, I'm gonna have a baby. My skin's gonna look good.
Yeah, this is before Botox. This is like, this is great stuff happening here. Vayomer Hashem al Avraham. The pasuk continues. Hashem says to Avram, what is she laughing about? Saying that I have a child even though I'm so old. Is anything beyond Hashem? Next year you're gonna have a time. You're gonna have a son. Sarah's gonna have a son. The next pasuk says, "Vatikrachesh Sarah lemalo tzachachti ki yareya v'yomalo ki tzachachti." Very unusual combination. By the way, you'll see there's actually an aliyah here, an aliyah break, which doesn't mean a whole lot, but it's there. She denies it, saying, "I didn't laugh because she was frightened." But he says, "No, you did laugh," and it's kind of left open. Now, the Torah tells us that she was, kind of reactive and she was scared. So I didn't laugh. Our first reaction was to deny it. I didn't laugh. But he says he didn't. No. Okay, so so if this existed in a vacuum, and we'd say, we can understand her reaction that she laughs. It's not so, as they would say in Yiddish, far-fetched, right? It's not so impractical that she would have this reaction. She's 90 years old. How many 9-year-olds have kids? Not even in the National Enquirer online at ShopRite do the 9-year-olds have kids. They cut off at like 70. So like, what's going on? What makes this complicated is, let's go back to the end of last week's parsha. Okay. So in the end of last week's parsha, go back to page, if you're in the stone 74, it's Perek Yud Zayin, Pasuk Yud Zayin, or Pasuk Tes Vav. So a lot happens in the end of the parsha. Hashem tells Avraham, you have to give everybody a bris milah, and Yishmael gets a bris milah, and he's 13 years old. We can figure that out easily. It's one of the dates that actually works out in the timing that works out in the Chumash. A lot of if you try to really figure out a lot of the timing and dates in the Chumash, it doesn't always work. So just don't get lose sleep over it. But that's why Yishmael gets a bris at 13, and that's why in many of the Our cousins communities, they get a bris at 13. Thank God we do it at 8 days and not 13. So Pasuk Tes Vav, again, that's after the paragraph break. Vayomer Elokim el Avraham Sarai ishtecha lo tikra shema Sarai ki Sarah shema. This is the name change. Your wife, she will not be called Sarai. She's going to be called Sarah. Uveirachti osa v'gam na'asati mimena lecha bein. And I will bless her, and I will give you a son. Ubeirachtiha, and I will bless her. And indeed, and a nation, great nations will come from you. Avraham falls on his face, and what does he do?
Yes.
He laughs. He's like, I'm so old. She's so old. We're going to have kids, really? So guess what? Avraham also laughs. And then, by the way, the next thing, Vayomer Avraham el Elokim lu Yishmael yilch fanecha, and Hashem says, look, oh, that Yishmael might live before you. What either way I always read is that you know that Yishmael actually had a first name. His first name was Lu. It says Lu Yishmael. That's like the fourth grade me speaking, okay? But Hashem says, never, but Aval Sarai Shtecha Yoledes Bein, the Karasa Shemo Yitzchak. She's going to have a son. He's going to be called Yitzchak. So we know his name Yitzchak before he's ever even there's a year before he's born. And I'm going to fulfill my my covenant with you. So a very, very simple question. Very simple question, okay? Why does God criticize Sarah for laughing and Avraham is not criticized for laughing? Is that a good question? That's a fair question, right? You give me that, Viv?
Mhm. Yep.
Good? Okay, so why? Any thoughts before we go further? I'm going to present 4 answers to this question. And this will be our topic for today. 4 answers to this. I think it's a very, very fair question, which bothered a lot of the Mefarshim. Okay, not all at once. So here's what's going to happen here. I got to just move this.
Can you
button.
repeat the question? I apologize.
If so in the beginning of our parsha, when the message comes to Sarah that she's going to have a child, she laughs. And God says to Avram, why did she laugh? It's not nice that she laughed. Is anything not possible for me? I'm God. But we see at the end of last week's parsha that when the same news was given to Avraham, what did he do? He laughed. And there was no criticism of his behavior. And he essentially says the same thing. I'm old, she's old. She said, I'm old, he's old. He laughed, she laughed. She's criticized, she's reprimanded in a sense. Avraham, nothing. It's almost like it's accepted. Okay?
Okay.
With me? Everybody good?
Mm-hmm.
Good. So the first thing that we're going to look at is Rashi. Now, but I'm going to show you, I'm using this site here called Al HaTorah. But if we look in the Rashi, let's look at the Rashi here in the end of Lech Lecha, 17, verse 17, 17. Okay? So if you're following in the Stone Chumash, it's page 74 on the left-hand column of Rashi, and it's 5 lines down, okay? And it says, and it starts, Vayipol Avraham al panav Yitzchak. He says, Ze Targum Unkelus Loshon Simcha Vachadi, okay? Now, what I could do, this cool thing here is, hold on. I gotta just move some boxes out of the way. Let me get that here. So look at this. Oh, look at that. Did you see that? Did it turn to English on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty cool. Okay. Pretty cool. Technology. So here, it says, Vayipol up Avram al panav Yitzchak. It says that the Targum explains, Lashon Simcha v'chadi. That chadi is joy, and he rejoiced. However, V'shel Sarah Lashon machuch. However, with Sarah, it's the meaning of laughter. He says, L'malata she'Avram ha'amin v'sameach. Avraham was a believer, and when he laughed, he was very excited. V'Sarah lo ha'amina v'liglaga. However, Sarah, when she was not a believer, she liglaga is like she made fun of it. She had no faith and sneered. I'm reading this translation, and that's why God was angry with Sarah when she laughed, but he was not angry with Avraham. Okay, so Avraham was Vivian,
Mm-hmm. Delighted, happy, yes.
Correct? He's like, oh, amazing. And Sarah, no. And he grants us in the Targum. Now, it's a nice Rashi, okay? How does Rashi know this? I mean, it's the same word. Right? Vayitzchak, vatitzchak. What changed?
Abraham fell, which maybe indicates humility. She didn't do that. Maybe prayer. I don't know.
It's absolutely brilliant. You hear what Yafit said? Boom. It's like she had a giant hammer and there was a little teeny tiny nail and she smacked it right in the head. Just like that. Beautiful. That's absolutely correct. Now, the reason why Rashi in general, by the way, and Rashi's not coming to give specific this and that. He says, "Ani basi el pshuta shel mikra." I want to come and give you the simple explanation of the mikra of the verses. Okay. Now, is anybody, if you look in the stone chumash, and this is what's interesting about this particular site. This is one of the things you have to be careful. This is why we always like to stick what's called Tzur Zadaf, the way it's actually published. When they put things online, it's not entirely accurate. By the way, if you compare what's written here online and what's written in the actual Rashi, it's not exactly the same. But there's something known as, in Rashi, we have something called the Dibur HaMaschil, or Divrei HaMaschil, is what we might call the title of the Rashi. Now, look at the Dibur HaMaschil of Rashi the way we have it here. Right? Yafit, do you have that in front of you?
I don't know where to look.
So like in the heading of that Rashi in Pasuk Yud Zayin, the Rashi, the heading is, okay, in our versions of the Chumash, in the Rashi, I'm looking at the stone Chumash, it says, Vayipol Avraham al panav Vayitzchak. If Rashi was just commenting on the word Vayitzchak, he would just write Vayitzchak. Now, by the way, on this page here, look at my cursor, it says Vayitzchak, but in the English, it says Vayipol Avraham al panav Vayitzchak. The English actually has it more accurate than the Hebrew in this version. But in the Chumash, the Dibur HaMaschil is not, and he laughed, it's, and he fell on his face and he laughed. So that's exactly what you said, Yafit. So sometimes we learn as much not only from what Rashi says, but by how Rashi phrases his commentary here, which is the whole phrase. It's, and he fell on his face and he laughed. Not just, and he laughed. Would it have been, and he laughed, we'd have no way of knowing the difference. So that's answer number one, which was beautifully stated by you, Yafit, Yashikoach, gold star, and you get to sit in the front of the classroom next week. Okay. Let's look at, the next thing I want to look at is the Chizkuni. The Chizkuni, I'm going to go here, and I could look at this. You see what's happening here? I can like pull up all these different mefarshim. And there was a Chizkuni here earlier today. Hello, Mr. Chizkuni. Come out. There you are. There you go. Okay. Now I'm going to just scroll down. I'm sorry if I'm making you dizzy with this, but you know, technology. This is pretty cool, by the way, that we could actually just do this together. Chamal v'chalav. Okay, here we go. You have the copy here, and it says that she laughs. First, he discusses that, you know, she was trying to figure out the calculations, and it didn't make any sense of how it was going to work. And here it says, Pasuk Yud Gimel, Lama zet tzachak Sarah. Why did she laugh? Okay, and that's what the Pasuk says here. Okay, Pasuk Yud Gimel on the right. Hashem says to Avram, why did she laugh? Lama zeh im tomar. So he asked the question outright. You have it on the top of your page right here. Lama lo hikped HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Avraham kamo shehikped al Sarah, kamo ken tzachak Avraham, kamo shenever parshas Achronos parshas Lach. This is our question. Avraham laughed, she laughed. So why did God not say anything to him? Okay. Ela mashal isha chachma shabala hochiach kalasa v'hochicha as bita. Umemela hirgisha kalasa ba'atzma kachim hochiach HaKadosh Baruch Avram b'fanav hay misbayesh ela hochicha min atzad. Now this is like a really interesting answer. Look at the translation when it says here. Okay. The answer is that seeing that Sarah is considered as on a lower spiritual level than her husband, which we can dispute later, it is considered as clear that if even her doubts were criticized, her husband's doubts were deserving of rebuke even more so, without the need for Torah to spell this out. Our author uses a parable to demonstrate this point, writing that when a wise woman wishes to rebuke her daughter-in-law for something, which is in general a dangerous proposition, okay? Yeah, I hear the chuckles, okay? Those are people with married kids. Both she and her daughter, yeah, right? You think you know how to take care of my son? I'll show you to take care of my son. We joke, by the way, Nebuch, that poor girl that my son's going to bring home. Oy Gevalt, the prying eyes that will be looking down on her. Oy, oy, oy. 5 older sisters. Oy, oy, oy. That when a wise woman wishes to rebuke her daughter-in-law for something both she and her daughter have been guilty of, she rebukes only her daughter instead, allowing her daughter-in-law to draw the necessary conclusions about her own behavior. If God had rebuked Avraham in Sarah's presence, he would have felt ashamed. He therefore did so in an indirect manner. So what the Chizkuni is actually saying, and take it or leave it for what it is, but he's the only one that actually literally asked the question, and so directly is that in fact, God was reprimanding Avraham. Is that and there's actually a term for this. My kids taught me a term for it, but I can't remember what it's called. But if you there's ways to give Musar directly, and then there's ways to say something, and then you realize that the person who really should be hearing is like, oh. So when God was speaking to, and I don't like the way this translation saying that she was greater, because we have a proof later in the parsha that Sarah was actually greater in prophecy than Abraham. So it's almost like she could take it, or when Hashem reprimanded her, then the Chizkuni says it's understood by him as well, indirectly, because if God reprimanded Abraham directly, he would have gone home to mommy crying and he wouldn't have been able to take it. That's kind of this, like, it's hard to understand what that means, because Avraham is not shy, and he could take the fiery furnace. I'm sure he could take a little mussar from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I don't know, but the Chizkuni says that there are ways to answer a question. Why is it that why did Avraham not get reprimanded? So you could say, oh, there's a reason why he wasn't reprimanded, or you could say, no, he was reprimanded. He was just done in an indirect fashion, and by reprimanding Sarah, it was indeed a rebuke on Avraham. So they're both in the same category, and they both were deserving of rebuke, and they both got rebuke. One got it directly, and as a result, Avraham got it indirectly. Okay, again, take it or leave it. You can do what you want with such an explanation. But let's go now to the third answer. Third answer is going to come now from the Meshech Chachma. Here, I'm going to just switch screen. Did my screen switch? Did you see me switch screens?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
for that. Meshech Chachma, Rav Meir Simcha HaKohen of Devinsk, which you have on your pages here at the bottom. Okay. Meshech Chachma now, he quotes from the Rambam. And actually, this version has notes, which I'll explain. You have the exact text in your handout there. So, Lama Zet Tzachakasara. Hinei Rabbeinu HaRambam b'Perish HaMishnah u'b'Chivura. So the Rambam in the introduction in his commentary on Mishnayos, it's called Hakdama LePerish Mishnayos, and also in Yisodei HaTorah, he says, he teaches us ki hanemar mepi Hashem yuchol ishtanos al yidei ishtanos hamakablim. L'chein pachtu shem yigram achet. Aval hanemar lenavi lo yuchal lehishtanos. Lazos kasher amar Hashem la'Avraham v'Yitzchak bilibo halaven mea shana yivaled mishum sheyuchal ishtanos. Aval Sarah acharei sheshama kfar mipi Avraham asher hu etzlo gilu shama pinavi kasher kara shema Sarah shenem lakol ze biacha v'Yitzchak l'chein amar lamazet zechachka Sarah. Why did you cry? Dehaloner navi l'tova lo yuchal shul ishtanos. You got that? Okay, good. Moving on. Okay, it's very confusing. Look, I'm going to read you this note here, and he explains it quite beautifully exactly what's going on. And I'll give it to you outside first, and then we'll read it inside. And that there is a difference in a prophecy that is given directly as opposed to a prophecy that's given indirectly. If a prophecy is given directly, then there is a possibility that it can change, that you can affect the outcome of that prophecy, or maybe it won't come true based on your behavior. However, if a prophecy is given indirectly, then that means that it's set in stone and it cannot change. So Avraham was given the prophecy directly. Sarah was not given it directly. It was given indirectly. So let's see what he says here in the notes here. And you have it. He has it in those notes there, but I'll read you here. He says, "Tochen devar v'lachar yesh l'daktik. Madu hikpid Hashem asar shetzachaka v'lo ha'amina sheteled ve'al Avram shegam lo ha'amin k'dichsiv v'yirachti gam osa v'gam nesati mina l'chabein v'rachti v'gam ameni yiyu." And it says, "Vayipol Avraham." He says, why, again, that's the question. Why is it that Avraham is not reprimanded and she is? U'mivaer to Avraham sheshama mapi Hashem tzachak. Avraham heard it directly from God. He laughed. Ki chashash shema yigrom hachet. He laughed. Why did he laugh? You're thinking like, wait a minute. There's no way that it can come true because I'm going to mess this up. Because a prophecy that's heard directly from God, if you don't hold up your end of the bargain, it may not come true. And he's saying, Shema Yigrom Hachet, meaning, Shema Sheshomea Novi Mipi Hashem, Shema Sheshomea Novi Mipi Hashem, Yachol Hispatel Machmas Hachet. Anything that you hear directly from God, it can be nullified or abrogated. Why? In case if you sin, that's going to happen. Aval Sarah Sheshama Mipi Novi. Avraham, Sarah heard it not directly from God, she heard it from Avraham. Once it's already third party, it's secondhand, then guess what? The prophecy can no longer be changed. And that's what this Rambam is saying. Whatever is heard, a good news that's heard from the Navi, it cannot be changed. Because then you'll never be able to check who's the true Navi, who's not. And he says it's not the difference between, that's a positive prophecy. And he gives the example, he says, is that when Avraham was given the prophecy, when Yaakov Avinu was told, you're going to have so many great things are going to happen to you, and God's going to be with you on your way, okay? And then it says that when Esav came, and this is a Gemara Brachos, when Esav came in the beginning of Parshas Vayishlach, and it says that Yaakov feared for his life. Vayera Yaakov. He became afraid. So the Gemara asks, what was he afraid of? So the Gemara answers, he says, no, Shema Yigram Machet. Because since the prophecy was given to him directly, and he says, Shema Yigram Machet, oh, maybe I've obviously sinned between now and then, so maybe now my protection is off, and whatever God promised me doesn't apply anymore. So he says, that's why Avraham laughs. Avraham laughs, and Avraham says, what, God, you're going to tell me that I'm going to have a child? That's great, that's wonderful, but you think that I am not going to sin between now and then? He says, how's that possible? Because how's that going to work, right? He says, it's not going to happen. Sarah, though, on the other hand, heard it secondhand. And since she heard it secondhand and not directly from the Navi, so she should never have doubted it, because once it's a good news, a nevuah that's given, a good news prophecy, that's it. It's written in stone and it cannot be changed. And therefore, she was criticized. Avraham was understandable that he had doubts because he was worried about his own performance, his own ability to stay sin-free. Sarah should never have had any doubts. So again, it's a different type of answer to the question. The answer is saying that, Avraham did not deserve any criticism. He acted normally because of this principle about this. Okay, fine. However, Sarah should have accepted it, carte blanche. These are interesting answers, but it's the last one that I really want to sink our teeth into. And I heard this is said in the name. Remember there was somebody called the Tzaddik of Yerushalayim, of Aryeh Levine. So Aryeh Levine, who died in 1969, he was known as the righteous person. There's a book called, I think it's Tzaddik in Our Time. But he was a legendary figure in Yerushalayim and certainly in the periods leading up to Hakamas HaMedina. And he was known, he used to visit prisoners in jail. Remember, he didn't want to let them go, especially like with Menachem Begin and his crew and the whole thing. But this answer, I was told, was given in the name of his wife. His wife, who died in 1952, Tzipora Chana Levin, Zichrona Levracha. How often do you get to hear a great answer to a great question from the wife of one of the Gedolim, right? So, they're not these nameless, faceless figures, that get blotted out of Frummy magazines because it might lead to dancing. These are real people who had real appreciation for Torah and wonderful wisdom they could share with us. So what we're going to look at now is the Haftorah. The Haftorah, hold the place here, but the Haftorah, if you have the stone Chumash, it's going to be in the back. Please turn to the back of the Chumashim for today's Haftorah, which will be recited by our Bachar Bar Mitzvah Henry Sachs. 1134. But I also have the text here if you'd like to see it. There we go. Okay? So here we are. I'm gonna just I gotta move this box up. Okay. V'isha achas. This is the story of the Isha Shunamit, the Shunammite woman. Okay. There was a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elisha, saying, my servant is dead, Ishi Mace, and you know that he did everything, and the creditor is coming to take to him, and he says, what shall I do for you? Tell me what you have in the house. And she says, Ein l'shivchasecha kol. She says, I have nothing. Babayis ki'im asuch shaman. All I have is a pot of oil. So he says, okay, go borrow I like this, borrow the vessels abroad of all thy neighbors, even empty vessels. I just want to know, when people write these translations, like, do they know that people don't talk like this anymore? Thou though thou shalt go in and shut the door upon me. Basa ubas v'sagar tadelas ba'adeich va'ad banayich, and go close the door, and whoever's there, pour out all those vessels, and you'll set aside which is full. So she goes, she shuts the door, and she does on a son, she brings the vessel, she pours it out, and it comes to pass when all the vessels are full, he says to the son, bring me a vessel, and he says, there's not a vessel more, and the oil stayed. Okay, this is really exciting so far. So then she comes and she tells the man of God, and he says, okay, go sell the oil and pay your debt, and you're gonna live your son's rest. Okay, there's miracle, there's oil, she has money, shkoyach. Ayi ayom, and it fell on that day that Elisha passed to Shunem. There was a great woman, and she constrained him to eat bread. And so it was that he passed by, and he turned in to eat bread. And she says to her husband, she says, look, I perceive that this is a holy man of God that passeth by us continually, because people passeth by all the time. Let us make a little chamber on the roof, and we'll set him a bed there, and I'll have a table. He'll have a like a guest room there. He's going to have a shtimmer. He's going to be able to go there, and tzimmer rather, and a table and a stool and candlesticks, and he's going to turn in thither. Okay, that's another word we don't use enough. Thither. It's not somebody trying to cut paper and who lisps. Scissor. It's thither, is like over there. And it fell on the day that he came thither, and he turned into the upper chamber, and he's lying down there. He says to servant Gechasi, call the Shunammite, and when he called her, she stood before him, and he says, now, behold, you've been careful with us, all this care, what can I do for you? What to be spoken for the king, or to the captain, the host? And she says, batoch ami anochi yoshaves. It's a great line, I dwell amongst my nations. And he says, what can be done for you? And he says, look, she doesn't have a son, and the husband is old. Okay, you can already see the connection. Now, the connection is very easy to see between our parsha and the Haftorah, but we're going to make that connection even stronger. And he says, call her, and stands at the door, and he says, Vayomer lamoed hazeh, on pasuk tezayin, lamoed hazeh ka'es chaya at chovekes bein. By the way, that's the exact phrase that we have in our parsha, kamoed hazeh, lamoed, which means a year from now, at this time next year, you're going to have a son. And here she says, at chovekes bein, you're going to be embracing a son. And she says, Vatomer el Adoni Ish Elokim al techazeh v'shivchasecha. Don't lie to me. Now, this is not laughing. This is real. Like, come on, stop. Don't yank my chain. Like, come on. However, Vatari Yeshava Telet Bein Lamoid Zageiz Chaya Asher Bel Elisha, and Elisha's words, the prophet, came true. And exactly that time later, she had a son. The child grows up, and he goes out with his father. The father is a reaper. He's a reaper. But this gets grim very quickly. And he says to his father, Vayomer el aviv, Roshi, Roshi, Vayomer lenar se'ol ima. The kid, all of a sudden, he grasps his head. He's like, my head. And they say, take him to his mother. She takes him, she brings him to the mother. He lies down on her knees, on her lap. Like, what does the mother do when the child is sick? You hold your child, we don't know what to do. But it's the most helpless feeling ever when your child is sick and you want to do something and you can't help them. It's debilitating. Roshi, he must have had some sort of stroke, an aneurysm, something. She's holding him until noon. Vaya mos. The child dies. Vatal vatashkivehu amitas ishu elokim vadiskor ba'ado v'adeitzei. So what does she do? She puts him on the Elisha's bed in his little guest room. She shuts the door and she goes out. Vatikra el isha vatomer shulchan ali echad min hanarim v'char asanos v'arutzad isha elokim ashuva. She calls her husband. Now, I don't know about you, but if something horrible, tragic happens like this, and I'm purposely reading it in a very calm fashion. She calls her husband, get me the servants, go get the car. I gotta go speak to Elisha. She's not freaking out. She's not yelling. She's not screaming. She's not hysterical. Vayomer madua tolechas elav hayom l'chodesh l'shabbos v'tomer shalom. Right? And he says, like, where are you going today? It's not Rosh Chodesh. It's not Yontif. This is, we learn from here halacha that you're supposed to visit your Rav or whatever on Shabbos and Yontif. And she's like, no, it's going to be fine. Everything's shalom. Just says, go, let's go. So, Chaf Vatelech Vatavo El Isha Lehim El Hara Carmel. She goes to Elisha, who's in Hara Carmel, Mount Carmel, right near Haifa. When he sees the Elisha sees from far away, says to Gehazi, that there's the Shunammite woman. He says, go meet her and say to her, is everything okay? Are you good? Is your husband good? Is your miracle son good? And she says, Shalom. It's all good. Vatavo Isha lehim elahar, vatachazek baraglov, vayigash kechasi lahadfa, vayom Isha lekim har pelikin av shamar ali, v'Hashem halim menem v'lehigidli. She comes to the man of God on the hill. She grabs his feet. Gehazi tries to push her away, like, don't get too close to the man. He's like, it's okay, leave her alone. She's obviously has something going on. She's bitter. And she didn't tell me, and Hashem didn't reveal it to me. She said, did I ever ask you to give me a son? Did I ever say, don't deceive me, don't trick me? And that's all he has to say. And the story goes on, and that Elisha goes back to the house, and he goes up and he sees this dead child lying on the bed. He goes in, he shuts the door, he davens, he put piv al piv, enov on pasuk lamadad, enov al enov, kapav al kapav, vayikar alav, vayochem b'sar yeled. He revives this child, this dead child. He brings him back to life. I forget who they say this. There are two stories like this in Navi. This turns out either to be Yonah or Yecheskel and Navi. I forget which. I have to look it up. But this child of the Shunammite woman. And he goes, and the child sneezes, and the child opens his eyes. And he says, call the woman. And he says, go and take your son. She bows down to the ground. She took up her son. She goes out. And whatever. Okay. I want to ask you this question. Somebody goes through a horrible experience like this. And somehow, she has the wherewithal. She has the wherewithal to say to her husband, it's okay. We're like, where's the boy? He's like, he's sleeping. He's good. Go get the car. Why are you going to the Navi? Everything, it's not Yantif. Well, there's no reason to go. She's like, it'll be good. It's Shalom. The Navi himself, through Gehazi, he says, are you okay? Is your husband okay? Is your son okay? And she says, Shalom. It's good.
Would the Navi have even known, just because he's a Navi, that something was wrong?
No, that's what, and he actually says as such. He's like, oh, I could see that it was hidden from me what was going on with her. And that's why he let her come closer, because he sees her pain. But he doesn't know what happened. Naviim are not, they're not clairvoyant. Right, they're not clairvoyant. They just have visions from God or whatever. What is she talking about? Hashalom lo? What? Shalom? What's shalom? Her life is just ruined, upside down. Her son is dead in the bedroom upstairs. And she's saying shalom? What's tutzach? How could she possibly say shalom? So here's where the wife of Rabbi Aryeh Levine, Tzipora Chana Levine, the Rebbitzin, she gives the answer. She says, and here let's, and this is going to answer, thinking of this in the context of our question, go back to our psukim. Is that when it comes to a desperate situation, and you have to rely, and this is not a lechatchila position. We never rely. Ein sonkan al hanes. But if you need a miracle to happen, okay, you have to be able to not accept your current reality. If you accept your current reality, then a miracle will never take place. So she knows, this Shunammite woman knows, that her son is dead. But I cannot say that he's dead. If I would go to him and say, oh, my son, he's dead, and he's like, what am I going to do? He's dead. There's nothing I can do. But she's going under the illusion that something can be done. And therefore she says, shalom, shalom, I'm fine, I'm good, you're good, we're good, I'm all good. And because she never accepts the reality, she never gives up the possibility that God can do some sort of miracle, therefore it's possible for it to be done. Look at the words, what happens here with Sarah. And this is where you have to read, and this is where the connection comes very close to the Haftarah as well, okay? And look at it, look what it says. Look at Pasuk Yud Gimel. She laughs, right? Vatitzchak Sarah b'kirba lemor. Vatitzchak Sarah b'kirba lemor. Read that carefully. Vatitzchak Sarah b'kirba. She laughs in her own midst by herself. However, lemor, the words came out of her mouth. How could I possibly have children? And Hashem says to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Saying, she uttered the words from her mouth. The words came out of her mouth. If they came out of her mouth, the reality, then she accepted it. I will never have children. So whatever miracle was presented possibly for her, it couldn't happen. It couldn't happen. Look back when Abraham laughs at the end of Lech Lecha 17:17. And this is what we noticed in the very beginning. And again, the words will just jump off the page at you. Vayipol Avraham al panav Yitzchak, he falls down on his face and he laughs. Vayomer bilibo. He doesn't say it out loud. Vayomer bilibo. If the words don't come out of your mouth, you could think it, you could feel it, you could sense it. But it says Vayomer. That's why the Torah, you could read it 100 times, you would skip over that word. Vayomer bilibo. He says it in his heart. He didn't say it out loud to anybody. So now you're going to have to ask the obvious question. Therefore, she's criticized. She's criticized because she laughs and she says it out loud and she accepts the reality. And therefore, since she accepts the reality, then the miracle can no longer be performed for her. So you're going to ask me, oh, Rabbi, but what happens? We know how the story ends. She does have a child, right? So it's Chachma, Rebbitzin Levine. That's why you have to read the pasuk afterwards. So Hashem says to Avraham, why did she laugh, saying, by doing so, she has ruined the possibility of that miracle taking place. Therefore, Hashem has to reiterate and says, Hashem davar. It's a renewing of the promise, or it's a reiteration, or perhaps it's even a new promise. It's different than the one that was told to Avraham in the end of Parshas Lech Lecha. It was told to him right now, and he says now, okay, that promise is gone. I have to say it again. Guess what? You're going to have a son a year from now, okay? And maybe now it sinks in, and that's why Sarah feels embarrassed. And she says, that loose hanging pasuk, she was panicked. I didn't laugh. Meaning she's like, realized, oh my God, according to this answer, I blew it. No, we saved it. We got a new guarantee. Contract fell through. Don't worry, we got a new contract. So we have four very different approaches to a very, very simple question in Pshat in the Chumash. Why was Sarah chastised, whereas Abraham wasn't? First one is because maybe it's a different type of laughing. How do you know that? The way Rashi reads it, because Vayipol Avraham, that he falls down, that shows a little bit of humility and belief and acceptance. The second is a cheskuni, that indeed he was reprimanded, albeit indirectly. We have the answer of the Meshech Chachma, that there's a difference between whether a prophecy is given directly or indirectly, based on that theory of the Rambam. And then we have the answer from the Rebbetzin of Vayera Levin, that there's a difference of whether you bring it out, the words out into public or not. If you bring them out in public, then it becomes real. So it's an interesting concept, by the way, when we always say don't say it out loud. You ever had this kind of
Yeah, like a bad dream.
right, exactly. That's exactly the example. When a person has a bad dream, they say the last thing you should do is actually say what happened.
Yeah.
Because I had such a dream, right? And that's why I have this notion of hatavas chalom, of nullifying or sort of fixing a dream. And it goes l'tov and l'ra. And we also say al tiftach pel satan. The Gemara says, don't open your mouth to the Satan. Don't say this is going to happen. You're going to give yourself, as Jews like to say, a kinahara, but really it's giving yourself an ayin hara. And when you say you shouldn't have an ayin hara, we say kanaina hara, that's how we talk. But Jews, we mess up words a lot. So we want to be careful of how we say things, but I think it's such a powerful thing, but it makes the connection between the Parsha and the Haftorah even stronger, because there, in her miracle, she just acts like normal. If you don't accept it, it didn't happen. Now, you could say she was in denial, she's in shock. There are many ways to read it, but in this context specifically, certainly vis-a-vis the way Sarah was, and she's criticized, he's not. I think it's a really, really clever answer. So again, we're just trying to find pshat in the psukim. It's an interesting question. It's an interesting answer. Really gives a lot for discussion. And there's a lot that's written about this. You know what? I wanted to share with you, right? Rav Bazak, I was reading in the new book that we talked about. He has actually a thing on Sarah's laughter. He asked a question. Some have suggested there's no substantive difference between her laughter and his laughter. And he gives basically the Cheskuni's answer. And he has Rashi's opinion. How does Rashi say, aside from, let's say, taking the Dibra Maskal answer that we said, but how does Rashi know the difference between the two? And he says, Avraham laughed bilibo in his heart, and Sarah laughed bikirba to herself. Avraham's laugh was a genuine laugh of wonderment and confusion. How could two such old people have a child? In other places in the Torah, thoughts of the heart, even if they express disbelief, are not considered negative, for they're seen as questions and not challenges. For example, Moshe says, should you say to yourselves, Bilavavecha, these nations are more numerous than we, how can we dispossess them? The question is not negative in itself and is followed by a response, you need have no fear of them. You have but to bear in mind what the Lord your God did to Paro and all the Egyptians. Okay, another place Moshe relates to another hypothetical situation. Say not to yourselves, Bilavavecha, the Lord has enabled us to possess his land because of our virtues. There too also, he does not berate them for their thought. Sarah's laughter, however, this is the key part, is bikirba, within her. This is the only time in the Torah that this word is used to describe a person's thoughts. Generally, the word karov or kirba, bikirba, is referring to a spatial location within a person or place. So we're going to have that coming up in Parshas Toldos. Rivka has two children. It says vayisrotatsu habanim bikirba. Within her, the two children struggled. It is now 2 years there's been famine in the land, b'kerev haaretz. So you must conclude that Avram's laughter expressed bewilderment, but Sarah's expressed disbelief. Again, it's a very interesting, careful reading of the words we have to look at always so carefully. So again, there's so much that's happening here. Really, really exciting stuff. And again, everybody, I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and I hope that tomorrow we just kind of go back to normal. But is this where I have to stop recording when I give my political commentary? Okay, I'm going to have to stop recording.